friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the Lawn Fawn Coaster Critters, and I'll also be using the Perfectly Plaid Spring 6x6 pad. I've stamped my images out in Memento Tuxedo black ink on some Copic friendly cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers today. I'm starting with the YR07 and I'm going to color my roller coaster. I'm doing a little bit of shading with this. So I'm using that YR07 on the right portion of each of those vertical pillars and also a little bit across the bottom. So I'm just holding my marker very straight up and down so that I can just use the very tip of it so I don't go out of the lines, because it's not a lot of room to fit two colors, but I wanted to have a little bit of shading. And then on the smaller portion, I'm just going to reverse that and shade on the left. Then I'll bring in the YR04 and fill in the rest of the track. So the lightest part is going to be the top, because that's where the sun would hit. So there's no shading on that top curve on either of these pieces, but I thought that that would be more realistic since the sun would be shining there and it would have the most highlight. I'll color in the smaller track exactly the same, again just using the very tip of my marker and a light hand so that I don't go outside the lines. And then while I have those shades out, I'm also going to use them to color in one of my balloons and the little fox as well. So I'm starting with the YR07 and doing a little bit of shadow towards the back of his head and towards the base of his tail, and then blending out with the YR04. And then I also wanted to add just a little bit more of that orange on part of his body. I wanted his belly and his face and his little paws to be white, but I wanted to carry some of that orange over and kind of blend it. So I'm going to use those two shades, and then I'm also going to bring in the YR02 to kind of soften up the edges there. For the rest of his body, I'm using the E000 and the E00, and I'm just adding a little bit of shading on the white parts of his body. I'm not going to cover it completely. I want that to fade into white, but I just want there to be a little bit of definition. I'll use those same two shades to color in my bunny in the exact same way, except this time I'm doing his entire body. So I'm using that E00 as my darkest, the E000 as my mid-tone, and then just leaving the bare white for the rest of his body for the highlight. And I'll use a little bit of colorless blender to just help that transition along. For the bear, I'm using E43, E44, and E47, and I'm starting with that E47 and laying in some shadows. Since these little critters are so tiny, you don't need a ton of dark, so I'm just adding a little bit, and then I blended that out really quickly with the E44, and then I'll save his face and his belly for that E43, just making sure to go over that transition really well so he's nice and soft and fuzzy looking. Moving on to the actual cars of the roller coaster, I'm using B21, B23, and B26. Before I actually do that, I'm going to color in one more of my balloons with those three shades. I used the B26 on the inside where the other balloon is kind of overlapping it, and then blended towards the edge with that B23 and used the B21 for a nice highlight there on the left. And then for the roller coaster cars, I'm going to add my darkest shade down towards the bottom edge. So I'm doing a line of that B26 across all three cars. I wanted all of them to be the same color. So I will just draw that in, and then I'm going to come in with that B23 and soften up that edge. Again, I'm using really light strokes with very little pressure on the marker and just using the very tip so that I can squeeze in all three shades in this small little area. Since these images are pretty tiny, it's a good idea to just color with a lighter hand, and you'll have a much better luck not bleeding out of the lines that way. So I wasn't sure when I started coloring these if I was going to color them solid blue or if I was going to do a different color on the top half, but I ended up deciding to do it all one shade and then just do a different color for the racing stripe. So I'm going to just color the top halves of these coasters exactly the same as I did the bottom half, just using that B26 for the darkest shade, and then the B23 as my mid-tone, and then blending out with that B21 for a nice highlight, especially on the tail that's sticking up and on the hood right there. The next combo that I'll be using is YG05, YG07, and YG09. I'm going to use the YG07 to do the racing stripe on the coaster cars, and then I will use all three shades to color in my last balloon and also the little flag. So I just used the YG09 for the darkest, the YG07 as the mid-tone, and then blend it out with the YG05 for the lightest. And then I also went back and colored in the wheel wells with the YG07 as well. The last combo that I'm going to introduce is some warm grays. I'm using W1, W3, and W5. I'm using the W1 just to add the tiniest bit of shading to those supports underneath the roller coaster tracks. And then I will use the W5 and the W3 to color in all of my wheels. And I'm just using the W5 towards the back left, and then blending forward with the W3 to the top right. And I added a bit of W1 to the bunny's tail as well. And now I can trim these out with the matching dies. Next, I took the stitch scallop rectangle frames and die cut that out of both light blue and white cardstock. I'm going to set aside the white frame and just work on the light blue portion since that's going to be my sky. I'm using the Lawn Fawn glue tube to adhere my images today since my Tombow Mono is running low. I thought I would try this one out. And I'm going to adhere the larger piece over to the right hand side, and then I'll tuck the smaller piece down on the left. Then I'm going to take the little flag and tuck that in behind the smaller track, so that might be where the roller coaster starts or finishes. Before I get any farther, I want to stamp my sentiment, so I'm going to pop that into my MISTI, and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp "Have a Thrilling Birthday." While I have my MISTI out, I'm also going to stamp the inside of my card. I'm using Lawn Fawn Moonstone ink, and my card base is also the Moonstone cardstock, so it's a perfect match. And I'm stamping the smaller track and the sentiment that says "Enjoy the ride." And then I'm also going to add the tiny little roller coaster car on top of that. I trimmed down my pattern paper with the outside in stitch rectangle stackables, and I'm going to adhere that to the front of my card base. So this is a standard size card, so it's 4 1/4 tall by 5 1/2 wide. And this is going to leave just a small border around for that Moonstone cardstock to show through. I've added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, and I'm going to just pop that up in the center of the card. And I will add the rest of my images with foam tape as well, just for a little extra dimension. So I added the bunny down in front, and now I'm just trying to get the spacing right for the little fox. And I decided that I was going to have to move him just a bit more towards the top. And then I'll add the bear right as he's coming up the crest of the hill there. And then I could fix the fox because I wanted them to be spaced evenly. And I will add the little cluster of balloons to the back of the bear's car, just for a little bit more fun and a nice pop of color. And that is going to complete our card for today. There's another peek at the inside. I decided to keep this one nice and simple since it's more of a masculine card. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would love to have your support. Also, if you want to make sure that my videos always end up in your feed, just be sure to hit that little notification bell. Here's 2 extra videos you may also be interested in, so hopefully those will tide you over until my next one. Until then, I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.